From the moment the sky changed, the world knew something was wrong. It wasn't a storm, or a strange weather pattern, or a satellite glitch. No, this was different. A massive shadow stretched across half the earth, darkening cities, mountains, and oceans. People stopped in the middle of streets, staring up in silence. Phones buzzed, radios went silent, and screens everywhere flickered to a strange alien symbol. Then, a cold, deep voice echoed through every device, in every language. This is the Galactic Council. Humanity has been selected for final evaluation. You have 72 hours to begin. Prepare. Panic followed instantly. News channels scrambled for answers. Governments held emergency meetings, and across every country, fear took hold. Was this an invasion? A message from God? A prank? But no explanation came. Only the cold presence of that enormous ship in the sky, unmoving, watching. The alien craft was like nothing Earth had ever seen, black as space itself, shaped like a giant ring spinning slowly above the clouds. It didn't fire weapons. It didn't speak again. It just hovered, silent and terrifying. Inside the ship, unseen by any human, the Council observed Earth through advanced sensors and psychic fields. 12 alien species sat around a glowing table, their faces emotionless, their minds sharp. Some looked insect-like, others like machines. One even seemed to be made of gas. Together, they had judged thousands of planets. Now it was Earth's turn. One alien, tall and silver-skinned, spoke in a calm voice. Class 0 Deathworld. Violent, unstable, primitive minds, dangerous instincts. This is the final test subject. Another replied, prepare the trial. Begin Phase 1. On Earth, chaos spread like fire. Cities locked down, military forces prepared for the worst. Some people prayed, others rioted. A few celebrated, believing this was proof that humans were not alone. But most people waited, uncertain, terrified. For hours, nothing happened. Then, at exactly midnight UTC, the first trial began. All over the world, systems started failing. Power grids shut down without warning. Satellites dropped out of orbit. Planes lost control and crashed. Every country, rich or poor, was hit at the same time. Streets went dark. Hospitals lost electricity. Communication vanished. It wasn't just technology. Nature itself turned against humanity. Superstorms formed within minutes. Earthquakes shook cities apart. Ocean levels rose, swallowing entire coastlines. It was as if the planet had gone mad. But this wasn't nature. It was the test. The Alien Council watched the destruction carefully. They were not testing Earth's environment. They were testing how humans responded. Would they panic? Would they turn on each other? Would they destroy themselves before the Council needed to act? It had happened before, with other species. The Council had no reason to expect anything different this time. But something unexpected began to happen. In one part of the world, a group of firefighters in Brazil formed a rescue network without waiting for orders. In Japan, retired engineers and students started fixing damaged radio towers using scrap. In India, people opened their homes to strangers fleeing floods. Across Africa, Europe, and North America, people began organizing themselves, not with fear, but with purpose. There was panic, yes, but there was also something else, a quiet kind of unity. The Council noted the patterns. One alien murmured, "They are responding faster than predicted." Another replied, "Initial fear response is lower than expected. Recalculate stress points." In the middle of a broken New York City, a young woman named Maya climbed onto a crushed car, holding a loudspeaker made from a megaphone and salvaged wires. "We don't know what they want," she said, her voice echoing across the ruined street. "But if this is a test, then we show them who we are. Not with guns, with action. Help each other. Organize. Don't let fear win." Her message was captured by a nearby drone still broadcasting. And somehow, Her words reached people in dozens of countries. She became an accidental leader, not chosen, not trained, but powerful all the same. In a military bunker beneath the Alps, General Hassan watched global feeds through flickering screens. "This isn't just disaster," he muttered. "This is deliberate. Someone wants to see what we do under pressure." His aide asked, "What do we do, sir?" Hassan replied, "We adapt, like we always have." By the end of the first day, more than 1 million people were dead. Cities had collapsed. Fires burned unchecked. But the aliens had also seen something strange. The more they increased the pressure, the more humans adapted. Makeshift hospitals were built from shipping containers. Communities formed barter systems when money became useless. People started to repair broken tech with whatever they could find. Humanity was bleeding, but it wasn't broken. The Council increased the intensity. Psychic waves were released across the globe, designed to trigger despair, anger, and hallucinations. People began to hear voices. Some saw things that weren't there. A soldier in France shot at shadows. A mother in Kenya heard her dead child calling from the sea. These illusions were meant to break morale. And yet, even under mental attack, people began to adapt again. A blind teacher in Nigeria helped her village focus by teaching meditation. "The fear is not real," she said. "It's a trick." We faced worse. Back on the ship, frustration began to grow. "They should have collapsed by now," one council member said. "The simulations were clear." Another responded, "Perhaps their status as a death world has given them more tolerance than expected." Death worlds were rare, planets so dangerous that life itself struggled to survive. Earth was one of the harshest. Every species there fought to live. Plants, animals, humans. Every day was a battle against disease, weather, hunger, and each other. Most intelligent species came from stable, safe worlds. Earth was the opposite, and that was starting to show. As the second night fell, a strange silence settled over the planet. Not because the disasters had stopped, they hadn't, but because the people had changed. They were no longer reacting with fear, they were acting with purpose. Old enemies stood side by side. Religions stopped arguing. People who had never met worked together like lifelong friends. Something ancient was awakening inside humanity. Not violence, not hatred. Determination. The alien council watched in silence. One of them leaned forward. "Begin phase 2, it said. "Let us see what they do when they learn the truth." A new broadcast lit up every remaining screen, every device that still worked. The alien voice returned. "You are not being tested for survival. You are being judged. You are too dangerous to join the Galactic Alliance. Your world was marked for deletion. This test was meant to confirm your weakness. But you are not weak." The message ended. There was no further explanation. No instructions. No demand. Just silence. For a moment, the world held its breath. People everywhere stopped, unsure what the message truly meant. But then, slowly across every city, every village, something powerful began to rise. Laughter. Not mocking, not crazy laughter. The laughter of people who understood something the aliens did not. Humanity wasn't just surviving a test, it was surviving a trap. And now, it was ready to answer back. In the darkness, humans began to move, not as victims, not as prey, but as something the universe had never seen before. A deathworld species that refused to die. And this was only the beginning. The world had changed in just 2 days. The alien ship still floated silently in the sky, casting its cold shadow across Earth. People had stopped wondering if it was going to attack. Now, they were wondering when. But something had shifted. Fear had burned out. What remained was focus, unity. People were no longer just reacting. They were thinking, adapting, and planning. The Council had tried to break them with chaos, then with psychological warfare. Both had failed. Now the aliens moved to the next stage, the real test. In cities and towns across Earth, Strange towers appeared overnight. No one saw them land. They were just there, silent, black, smooth as glass. They rose out of the ground like sharp teeth. Each tower hummed with invisible energy. And on every screen, the same message appeared. Enter the tower. Complete the challenge. Pass or perish. At first, people hesitated. What was inside? A trap? A puzzle? A weapon? No one knew. But they also knew something else. Earth was out of time. The longer they waited, the harder things would get. So they acted. The first tower to be entered was in what remained of Berlin. A team of soldiers, engineers, and civilians stepped forward. They weren't chosen by any government. They just had the courage to try. As they stepped into the black doorway, the outside world held its breath. Inside the tower, the rules changed instantly. The team found themselves in a giant white room, with walls that stretched endlessly in every direction. Gravity felt weaker. Time seemed slower. It was as if they were inside the ship itself, or somewhere completely outside Earth's reality. A voice spoke, but it wasn't like before. This one was smoother, less robotic, more curious. You are inside Challenge 1. Solve the riddle. Escape the room. You have 1 hour. Failure will result in termination. No hints, no instructions, just a glowing cube in the center of the room, floating silently. The team circled the cube. It had symbols carved on its sides. Some looked like math, others like maps, or even constellations. One man touched it, and the room shifted instantly. The floor vanished. Suddenly, they were floating in space, looking down at Earth. Then, just as fast, they were back in the white room. They realized the cube was more than a puzzle. It was a mind trap. Each time they touched it, it brought out something different. Memories, emotions, images from the past. One soldier saw his mother. Another saw a battlefield he had never been on. The youngest member, a girl named Talia, saw herself as an old woman standing on a ruined Earth. It was terrifying, confusing, but not impossible. They began working together, mapping the symbols, rotating the cube, sharing what they saw after each touch. Slowly, the patterns emerged. It wasn't just testing intelligence, it was testing cooperation, memory, and emotional control. With seconds left, they solved it. The cube vanished. A door opened. They stepped through and came out on the other side of the tower. Alive, changed, and watched by millions. They weren't heroes. They were proof. The towers could be beaten. From that moment, teams across the planet began entering the towers. Some challenges were mental. Some were physical. Others tested pain, fear, even loyalty. One group in Egypt had to choose between saving themselves or helping strangers escape with them. They chose the strangers, and the tower let them live. But not every group made it. Some failed. Some disappeared. Some were never seen again. The Alien Council observed everything in silence. Each test was recorded, each choice analyzed. One council member, with skin like stone and eyes like glowing coal, spoke quietly. They solve faster than predicted. Even when scared, they adapt. Another nodded. This is not logic alone. There is emotion. Emotion drives their choices. The tall silver alien, the one who had first labeled Earth a Class 0 Deathworld, stared at the screen. Emotion is weakness, he said coldly. It makes them unstable. But others were beginning to disagree. Back on Earth, things were getting harder. The more towers they cleared, the more difficult the next ones became. The alien designs adapted to human strategies, learning from each success. Soon, towers began to move. One vanished from California, reappearing in rural China. Inside them, gravity shifted. Time bent. One team reported spending 3 days inside a tower, only to find out only 3 minutes had passed outside. Human scientists tried to study the towers. Satellites captured no signals from them. Probes vanished when they touched the surface. But they noticed one thing. Every tower sent data, not just to the ship above, but far into deep space. Somewhere out there, others were watching. And something else had changed. The people who came out of the towers were not the same. They were sharper, quieter. Their minds were clearer, but their eyes were different. They had seen things inside those towers that couldn't be explained. Things from their pasts. Visions of possible futures. One survivor whispered, "They weren't just testing us. They were showing us what could come if we fail." As the number of completed towers increased, something new happened. A signal from Earth was sent back to the ship, not from the aliens, but from humans. A group of hackers and engineers, led by a teenager in Lagos, had found a way to tap into the alien frequency using a modified radio telescope. They didn't send threats. They didn't ask for mercy. They sent a message. "We understand now. You're afraid of us. That's why you test us. You wanted us to break. But we don't break. We become stronger." Inside the council ship, alarms rang. For the first time, Earth had spoken back. The silver aliens stood in anger. "They are not allowed to access our systems." But another council member, one shaped like a tree, glowing with soft blue light, replied calmly, "They accessed it on their own. We never gave them the tools." The silver one growled, "We gave them a test. They turned it into a challenge." Back on Earth, the final phase was about to begin. The largest tower of all, hidden until now, rose from the center of the Pacific Ocean. It stretched into the sky, taller than any building on Earth. It was not a test. It was a message. The challenge had changed. It was no longer about survival. Now it was about purpose. One final message appeared on every device. "Enter the final tower. Face the core. You choose your future or your extinction." Around the world, people gathered. Scientists, soldiers, leaders, students. Not forced. Not ordered. They chose to go. Not to prove they were strong, but to prove they were ready. And as the world watched the final team step into the massive tower, something quiet settled over the planet. Hope. Not the kind that waits. The kind that fights. And deep in the council ship, as silence fell, a thought formed in the minds of even the oldest, coldest aliens. Maybe Earth was never the test. Maybe Earth is the answer. The final tower stood like a dark needle rising out of the Pacific Ocean, touching the sky. No one had seen it rise. It was just there, massive, silent, watching. Satellites that tried to zoom in were blocked. Drones that got too close vanished. The alien ship in orbit stopped broadcasting. The council had gone completely silent. It was as if the test had entered its final stage. And now it was humanity's turn to speak. From all over the world, the strongest, smartest, and bravest people came forward, not because they were ordered, but because they chose to. Some were soldiers, trained to fight. Some were scientists, skilled in knowledge. Others were normal people with no special title, but hearts full of courage. They came together on ships, helicopters, and submarines, landing near the base of the tower. No country claimed control. No one fought for leadership. This was no longer about nations. This was about humanity. The team that entered the final tower was made up of 10 people. Each one had survived the earlier challenges. Each had faced fear, pain, and loss. But none of them had broken. Their leader was Maya, the same woman who had spoken through the broken streets of New York during the first attack. The world had watched her survive chaos, face hallucinations, and lead people through the second tower. Now she stood before the final door. No one said a word as it opened. Inside, everything changed. There were no bright lights or glowing puzzles, no impossible rooms or shifting gravity. The space was quiet, dim, and endless. A hallway stretched forward into blackness, lined with lights that blinked slowly as the group walked. They moved together, their breathing calm, but their minds alert. Each step felt heavy, like the tower itself was watching them. Then came the voice, not robotic, not alien. It was familiar. It spoke in perfect human tone. Welcome to the core. This is not a test. This is reflection. The hallway ended in a wide room, with smooth black walls that glowed faintly. In the center was a floating sphere, dark and pulsing. Around it, 10 chairs rose from the ground, shaped to match each person. Without speaking, they each sat down. The moment they did, the room vanished. Each person found themselves alone. But they weren't just alone. They were inside their own minds. Maya stood in her old apartment in New York. The windows were shattered. The streets outside burned. She heard a voice. The voice of her brother, who had died in the first wave. He looked at her with sad eyes. "You could have saved me," he whispered. She froze. Across the tower, others faced similar trials. A soldier relived the day he had to leave civilians behind. A doctor saw the faces of patients she couldn't save. A teenager remembered the moment he chose to run instead of fight. The alien system wasn't testing intelligence now. It was testing guilt, regret, the kind of pain no weapon could match. And still, the humans endured, not by fighting the visions, but by facing them. Maya stepped forward and hugged the image of her brother. "I couldn't save you," she said, voice shaking, "but I'll save who I can. I'll keep going." With those words, the illusion shattered. One by one, the others broke through their personal trials. Some screamed, some cried, some fell to their knees, but all of them stood again, stronger, clearer, unbroken. The room returned. The sphere pulsed faster now. Then, for the first time, it spoke directly. "We feared you." The humans stared in silence. The voice continued. "You come from death. You thrive in chaos. Your planet should not have created life. And yet you grew. You built. You fought. You endured. We called your world a death world. We believed it made you dangerous. We tried to break you to prove it, but we were wrong." Outside the tower, the world watched, waiting. No one knew what was happening inside. The oceans had gone calm. The alien ship remained still. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. Inside, the humans stood as the sphere's shape changed. It opened slowly, revealing a glowing white core. A light that didn't blind, but warmed. "You are not a threat. You are a challenge. And perhaps a guide. Your pain has taught you strength. Your flaws have become your power. Where others collapsed, you rose. You are what we were long ago." The room shifted around them. Images floated, planets burning, species fading, civilizations falling. The Council had seen many worlds, tested many lives, but none had responded like Earth. "You are still dangerous," the voice said, "but not because of hate, because of potential." Maya stepped forward, speaking clearly. "Then why the lies? Why the pain? You could have asked us to prove ourselves. We would have answered. Instead, you tried to break us." The voice paused. Then it answered, quieter now. "Because we feared the answer." Silence again. And then the tower did something no one expected. It vanished. One moment it was there, dark, tall, endless. The next, only water remained. The 10 humans found themselves standing on a platform in the middle of the ocean, wind blowing gently around them. And in the sky above, the alien ship blinked, then began to move. It turned, slowly at first, then shot upward into the stars, leaving Earth's orbit without a word. All across the planet, screens came alive with a final message. "The test is over. You have passed. We are leaving. We will not return unless you call us." The world erupted, not in fear, but in awe. People cried, hugged, screamed in disbelief. Nations didn't celebrate as enemies, but as survivors. There were no flags, no borders in that moment. There was only Earth. Maya and her team were picked up by rescue ships. They were asked thousands of questions, but they had only one answer. We didn't win by being perfect. We won by being human. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. People didn't return to the old ways right away. Governments worked together. Borders opened. Technology was shared freely. Science moved forward. People began to rebuild, not just what was lost, but what had never existed. True unity. The test had ended. But something bigger had begun. Because somewhere out in the stars, a message from Earth was traveling at the speed of light. We are here. We are ready. And we are not afraid. And far beyond the stars, in the deepest part of space, something ancient and powerful opened one eye and listened. The skies were clear. The stars were quiet. And for the first time in weeks, the alien ship was gone. But peace didn't feel right. Something was off. People celebrated at first, dancing in the streets, lighting candles, hugging strangers. The final tower had disappeared. The council had left. Their message was clear. Humanity had passed. But behind the joy, there was a quiet question that no one wanted to ask out loud. Why did they leave so fast? Back in New York, Maya sat in a recovery center with her team. Reporters called her a hero. Scientists called her a miracle. But she didn't feel like either. Every night, she dreamed of the tower, of the strange light, of the words the voice had spoken. We feared the answer. Those words stayed in her head like a warning. Elsewhere, military satellites picked up strange signals. At first, they thought it was static from deep space. But the signal was growing, repeating, pulsing, coming from somewhere beyond the range of the council ship. Something older, something watching. A scientist named Dr. Lyon, working in an underground lab in Iceland, finally cracked the signal. What she found sent chills down her spine. The signal wasn't a message. It was a call. Not from Earth. To Earth. She gathered her team, heart racing. The test wasn't just about us, she said. It was a broadcast. We passed. And now someone, something, knows we're here. Within hours, world leaders received her report. And by sunrise, fear began to grow again. Not of the council, but of what might come next. Meanwhile, in the sky above, stars began to blink in strange patterns, one by one. Entire constellations disappeared from view for minutes at a time. Telescopes couldn't explain it. Some said it was a glitch. Others weren't so sure. And then, without warning, a ship appeared. But it wasn't like the council's. It was bigger, much bigger. It didn't float gently like the council's ring. It tore through space like a blade, glowing red and black, with cracks of lightning running across its hull. It didn't send a message. It just came. At first, people thought it was another test. Maybe Phase 4. But this was different. The ship didn't hover. It descended, fast, straight into Earth's orbit. And then, it stopped. Completely still, like it was waiting. Back in New York, Maya felt it before she saw it. A pressure in her chest, a weight in the air. The skies turned red for a second, like the sun had blinked. She looked up. The clouds were shaking. Around the world, sensors failed. Satellites fell. Ocean tides reversed. Animals went silent. Then, finally, the ship spoke, but not with words. It spoke in dreams. People everywhere began to see the same thing when they closed their eyes. A burning world, torn apart by fire and claws. Giant creatures made of shadow. Cities made of bone. And at the center of it all, a black throne, floating in space. Sitting on that throne was a being no one could fully see, only feel. A presence so heavy, it crushed thought. It didn't speak in sound. It spoke in feelings. Rage, hunger, curiosity, and a single idea. The council failed. Let us see for ourselves. The council hadn't been testing Earth. They were warning others. Humanity hadn't just passed the test. They had set off an alarm. Back in Iceland, Dr. Lyon connected the signal to an ancient part of galactic history, something called the Starwake Protocol. It was an old law, long hidden, about planets that passed final tests too easily. Those planets were considered risk-class anomalies, and when that happened, the Council stepped aside, because something worse came next. The Eternals, creatures not part of the Council, beings that had ruled before the galaxy was even mapped. Things so powerful, so ancient, the Council themselves avoided them. These beings watched from the void, and only awakened when a new power threatened their silence. And now, they were awake. Earth's final challenge had just begun. But humanity didn't wait for orders. World leaders met in hours, not days. Military bases went on alert, but unlike before, there was no panic. People remembered the towers, the trials, the unity. They had faced death once. They would do it again. Maya was flown to a secret command center beneath Antarctica, where scientists and generals had built a prototype defense system using alien tech recovered from the towers. The mix of human invention and stolen Council code. They called it Project Torchlight. The goal: send a message back, not of fear, of warning. As Earth's systems came online, a message was prepared. Maya would speak it in every language, from every corner of Earth. She stood before the mic, calm, focused. The red sky blinked above her. Her voice echoed across the stars. "We know you're watching. We know you're ancient, but we're not afraid. This is Earth. We don't bow. We don't break. If you want to understand us, don't send dreams. Send yourselves." Then Earth waited. For a full day, the ship above didn't move. Then, without warning, it split open. A piece of it dropped into the atmosphere, huge, burning, like a meteor made of metal. It landed in the Sahara Desert, carving a crater miles wide. The sand turned to glass. Nothing came out, but the message was clear. They had accepted the challenge. Inside the ship piece, teams found something strange. Not weapons, not monsters. A door, and 3 words carved into alien metal. Last trial begins. The world stood still. The great ship hovering above Earth had split open, and the massive piece that fell into the Sahara Desert was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a battle-ready craft. It was a door. A heavy, silent door, embedded in the heart of the largest crater the world had ever witnessed. The dust had barely settled when the world's military forces arrived, a wave of soldiers, engineers, and scientists. But no one spoke of attack. No one mentioned war. There was only one thought in everyone's mind. The final trial was here. And this time, humanity was ready. They had survived the towers, the tests, the psychological warfare. They had faced their fears, their regrets, their own minds, and had come out stronger. Now, the Eternals, the beings that had watched silently from the stars, were ready to challenge them once more. But this time, Earth had something new: unity. Maya, along with her team, had been flown directly to the Sahara, where military leaders, scientists, and strategists stood at attention, waiting for her. She was no longer just a survivor of the towers. She was their leader, their voice, and today her words would carry the weight of Earth. "Are we ready?" Maya asked, looking at the team of engineers and soldiers beside her. A veteran soldier, Lieutenant Valen, looked at her with determination. "We've got everything we need. We just don't know what's inside that door, but we're going to find out." She nodded and turned her eyes to the door that loomed in front of them. It was made of some dark, metallic substance, shimmering and pulsing with an energy that was almost alive. It felt wrong, like it didn't belong to Earth. Dr. Lyon, the scientist who had uncovered the Starwake Protocol, walked up beside Maya. "I've run every scan we can. No signals, no defenses. Whatever is inside is waiting for us to step through that door." The team stood in tense silence. They knew this was no longer about surviving a test or proving their strength. The Eternals, ancient beings with unimaginable power, had finally shown their hand. It was time for humanity to prove it was more than just a survivor. Maya stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what would happen when they entered, but she knew one thing for sure. Earth wasn't backing down. The moment she touched the door, a deep hum ran through the ground, through the air, like the entire planet itself was reacting to the energy coming from the ship. Then, the door slowly creaked open. Inside, there was no light, no familiar technology, just darkness. Then a low voice echoed from every direction, deep and resonant. "You have passed, but can you survive what you have awakened?" The ground trembled beneath their feet, and then the door slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. The room they found themselves in was unlike anything they'd experienced before. It was a vast, empty space, but the walls seemed to breathe with a life of their own. The very air felt thick and heavy, like it was alive, watching them. Suddenly, the walls began to shift, forming images, visions of destruction. A planet being torn apart by fire and ice, a city collapsing beneath the weight of a monstrous force. These weren't just images of the past. They were visions of what could happen, what would happen. "This is your fate," the voice whispered again. "You are the last hope of your kind, but hope means nothing when faced with the power of the Eternals." Maya's hand clenched into a fist. "We're not afraid of your power. We faced worse, and we're still here." A deep laugh echoed through the walls. It wasn't mocking. It was knowing, as if the voice understood something Maya didn't. "You cannot fight us, Earth. We are not your enemy. We are your extinction." Then the ground beneath them shook violently. The air grew colder, and a black mist began to pour from the walls. It swirled around them like a living thing, closing in. The team raised their weapons, but they knew they didn't stand a chance against whatever force the Eternals controlled. This was no longer about firepower. This was about survival. Then, as the mist surrounded them, something unexpected happened. Maya felt a pulse of energy, stronger than anything she'd ever experienced. A connection, like the very core of Earth was responding to the challenge. It wasn't just the humans who had strength. The Earth itself was alive. The mist hesitated. The walls trembled. The voice, no longer cold or threatening, spoke once more, quieter this time. "You are not alone, Earth. You are stronger than you know." Suddenly, the mist vanished. The room grew brighter. The walls stopped shifting, and in the center of the room, something new emerged, a door. But this door wasn't dark. It was glowing, golden, shining with a light that felt warm, welcoming. And beyond it, Maya could see the stars, Earth's home, hanging in the sky, safe and whole. The team stood in shock for a moment, unsure of what they were seeing. Then Maya stepped forward, the words she had spoken earlier echoing in her mind. "We don't break. We don't bow." Without hesitation, she walked through the golden door. On the other side, the world was waiting. The sky was clear. The land was calm. The stars above were silent. And then the message came. "You have passed the final trial. Earth has chosen its path. You are free to grow, free to evolve, free to join the stars." The ground beneath their feet trembled once more, but this time, it wasn't a threat. The Earth itself was alive with possibility. The ship above Earth, huge, dark, and intimidating, rose higher into the sky. And as it did, it slowly faded into the distance, leaving behind nothing but a trail of light. Humanity had survived. But it wasn't just survival that had won the day. It was strength, unity, and the ability to choose their future. Earth wasn't just a death world anymore. It was a world of potential. Maya stood with her team, watching the sky above. They were no longer looking up in fear. They were looking up in hope. A hope that had once been a fragile dream, but now felt real. They had passed the test. And now, they were ready for whatever came next.